Hello, everyone. It's me again. I'm Alan, and today we have a new guest speaker. He's Theo. Uh, Theodore is a real name. Theo is with an abbreviation. So Theo is currently a sophomore or a second year student of Columbia University in New York City. So Columbia School is a Ivy League school. So it's also the oldest institute in New York City. So today we will have Theo to share us about the life of study. And in the next video, he's going to share about his life in New York. Hi, Theo. Hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you. How are you?
I'm good too. Thank you so much. About your life in study, I actually quite interested about how do you prepare for the admissions to Columbia University, which is one of the Ivy League schools.
Yeah, of course. So for me personally, a big part of the application process was writing the application itself and like preparing throughout high school, making sure that you have the right extracurriculars, that your grades are good, that you take like the SAT or the ACT.
Mm,
But for me, I think the biggest part of the application process is like your extracurricular activities and like what you do outside of school, because like when you are applying to the Ivy Leagues, almost everyone has good grades. Everyone has like is the top of their school, and I think that what really sets you apart are your extracurricular activities and like what you do outside the classroom. For me, that was debate. Debating was a huge part of my life
mm,
in high school, and I think that that really helped me in the application process. Like I definitely talked about it when I was writing my application and highlighted it as one of my as something that transformed my high school career. So I would definitely, if I had to give you advice about applying to Columbia, would be to focus on your extracurriculars while also balancing your academics as well. And I think that for me, another thing I would say would be to be creative with like one of the writing prompts, because like a lot of the admissions officers here read
mm,
so many different admissions. So you really want to make your, I guess, like your application stand out. And one of the ways to do that is to be more creative with how you present yourself. Like, for example,
mm,
when I was writing my admissions, like when I was writing my personal statement or like my responses to the questions that the university gave me, I would like
mm.
try to like have a or like try to approach it from a different angle or like give a twist to it. Like when they asked me to list something, I would, for example, write a poem instead. Like just finding
Mm.
ways to make things more creative, make things different, make things more enjoyable to the reader. It will definitely give you an edge in the admissions process. Yeah.
Wow. So all are these techniques like you know these techniques already before you do the application, or is there someone teaching you about that?
Well, a lot of the advice that I got was from my school's like admissions counselors, and I also
Mm,
obviously asked people who were at Columbia when I was applying, and like asked them about the like different tips or like I guess like I also Columbia also goes to Hong Kong. I think there's a recruitment officer, so like showing up
mm,
at those events and asking questions is also important. But yeah, I think that overall, just like making sure that you communicate, like you talk to people who already go to the school so that you can get their opinions. Also, like
mm.
I'm sure your school's admissions counselors have a lot of information about this as well. So they have been a big help for me as well. Yeah.
Right. So you have any other schools you applied for during that, like other
Um,
than Columbia University?
Yeah. So Columbia University was my early decision choice, which meant that
Right.
I applied early, and I got my decision in December, which meant that
Mm,
I was not able to apply to other schools because it was a binding decision. So yeah,
mm.
I didn't apply to other schools.
So can you explain a bit more about the early decision
Yeah, of
application?
course. So basically, an early decision application is an opportunity for you as a student to solely focus on one university. It
Right.
means that basically, if you know that you really want to go to this university, you can apply early to it, and if you get accepted, then it means you have to go to the university and you don't have to apply to other universities. So a lot of people, if they know which university that they are as like their
Mm.
number one choice, their top choice, they really want to go here, they would apply there early, and which would mean that if they did get accepted, they would get notified early in December instead of the regular like May notification, and they would have to go to that university. And like the other option would be to apply as a regular decision, which would mean that you can
Mm.
apply to as many universities as you want, but you would get your results later on. And usually, early application, I would definitely recommend that if you know like which university you're applying to, because, for example, at Columbia, I think like 50% around of the cohort is like accepted through early decision. And I think
Mm.
that it's definitely an edge up because it tells the university that you really want to go to this you really want to go there, and like you're willing to like forego all your other options in order to go to this particular university.
Mm. So that means the early decision application, that application is got higher chance
Yeah,
than the regular decision application.
yeah, because you're telling the
Oh.
university that like this is like the one university that I want to go to
Mm.
out of everything. So yeah.
Mm. And you get this notification ready by January or February
Usually it's like by December.
as
So
well.
you would
So
apply,
you do the application in
you do the
September,
application in like I think it's like early September, November,
right?
and then by December you would get your notification. Um,
Oh.
yeah. And usually the regular decisions are those are due like in like the beginning of January,
Mm.
I think. Yeah.
And then in the first 2 years of studies, um, the courses that you took will be the compulsory, the core curriculum, right?
Yeah. So the core curriculum is something that's like unique to Columbia. It's sort of like
Mm.
a bunch of classes that every Columbia College student has to take. And it's not like so for me, for example, this semester, I have one class that is a core
Mm.
curriculum class. And then usually I choose like 3 or 4 more courses on top of that, which are like my
Mm.
own like choice.
Mm.
But it's basically a way for I guess like everyone to have some sort of equal class discussion section where like you get to meet other people who are on in your year and have conversations about like um, right now I'm in this class called Contemporary Civilizations, which is more of
Right.
like a discussion about like, oh, how society is built, like what does justice mean, and it was very like
Mm.
philosophical in that sense. So these classes are really meant to like give you the groundwork for like I guess like major, I guess like fundamental thought within like the Western civilization. So yeah, that's
Mm.
like the main gist of Columbia's core curriculum.
Yeah. But actually, that's just really good because this actually helps you to build a more diverse and more critical thinking in different perspectives.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
I believe that your weekly schedule should be quite busy. So, how do you plan your week? What do you do like in the day and in the week? Like how much time you spend on
Yeah.
studies, how much time you spend on the activities?
Yeah, so I definitely think that my schedule is pretty busy. I have because I'm like part of like so many clubs. Like these clubs definitely take
Mm.
up a lot of time. Um,
Right.
Usually, like during the week, I have from Monday to Thursday, I have classes. I have classes like I try to schedule all my classes like in the morning from like 8:40 to like 12 so that like by
Mm.
the afternoon I can get like the rest of the day off to work on other
Mm.
things, whether that be like club stuff or like just to like catch up on homework. But I definitely recommend like if you can control your schedule, like try to like do what works best for you. Like for me, I'm trying to be more of a morning person, so I try to schedule all my classes in the morning so that like I can like wake up and like start my day early. But yeah, I think that overall, like even though the work week is kind of busy, like it ends on Thursday. Like today, I don't have classes tomorrow, so I
Mm.
have sort of a long weekend, and I have a lot of time to like hang out with friends or like do homework and things like that. So there's definitely a work-life balance that you need to be able to achieve when you're in university.
Mm,
So yeah, it's like definitely a process of like figuring out what works for you, and like how to arrange your schedule to achieve that type of balance.
mhm. So I believe in your school, the schoolwork will be quite heavy as well. So what kind do you um how about workload? What kind of work and assignment do you usually need to complete before or even after the
Yeah.
class?
So because I'm more of like a humanities person, a lot of
Mm,
my homework revolves around reading. For
mm,
example, like over the past 2 days, I've had to read like 5 chapters of a book. We're right now reading like this book called like Plato's Republic, which is like basically like very philosophical about like what justice is. It's for my contemporary civilizations class, but like there's definitely a lot of reading involved, especially for me, just because like a lot of the classes that I'm taking this semester are like very humanities based. Like
mm,
I'm taking like Intro to American Politics, which has a lot of like textbook reading and stuff like that. But then I'll like if you're taking more like STEM classes, a lot of the assignments are more like problem sets that are due, and just like
mm,
doing problems and like working group work with like other people, other students as well.
mm,
But yeah, for me, a lot of like reading and essays for me. Usually that takes around like it doesn't take like I would call myself maybe like a fast reader, but like it definitely takes up a significant portion of your time.
right. Do you have do you have any midterm exam or like a test every 2 to 3 weeks?
Yeah. So we definitely have midterm exams. Like we have a midterm exam usually and a final.
Mm,
So it would just be usually like two exams per semester.
mm,
And we like for other classes, depending on like how the syllabus is or how the professor arranges it, we would
mm,
sometimes also have like weekly problem sets or like discussion posts that are graded.
mm,
And like participation also is part of our grade too, which would help, because then the exams are not as heavily weighted. But overall, there are definitely different ways in which like grading is done depending on like the professor. Yeah.
right. So you also mentioned about the small class teaching. Other than the small class teaching, do you have a separate like a tutor following your study?
Um, I don't think no, I don't think but for me personally, I don't have like tutors that
Mm,
like I would do like one-on-one sessions with. I don't have that. But
mm,
like the professors and the teaching assistants do hold like office this thing called office hours, where it's like if we have
mm,
questions, we can just like drop in and like ask them questions and like sort of like get their opinion on like whether they think like I'm doing this problem in the right way or like
mm,
whether this writing is coherent. So there are definitely resources available to us. If we do need help, we can go approach them. Apart from that, we also have this resource called the Writing Center where we can like, if we write essays, we can like go to them and ask and like get their advice on like how to make the essay better,
mm,
how to make it more coherent. So we have a lot of resources available to us if
mm.
we do need help. Yeah.
So you actually got a lot of assistance ready from the teacher assistant, the professors, and the um, yeah, and the other staff that helping you. So
Yeah.
is there any like a compulsory session that you will need to book every week to meet them? Or
Um,
basically, if just feel free to go whenever you need.
Yeah, usually it's like feel free to go whenever you need. Like if you have specific questions in mind, like you can go and like talk to them, but like it's not something that you have to go to regularly. Yeah.
Mm, wow. I mean, studying in Columbia University needs a lot of self-motivation and self-encouragement. Otherwise, a heavy workload, and you also need to be, like, as your professor said, you have to be in charge for yourself.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So in this episode, we actually talk about the life of studies in the Columbia University, the workload, and also like different ways of learning. So in the next episode, Theo is going to share about his living in New York. I will see you in the next episode. Bye bye.
All right.